As Zara stared out into the cold, shimmering void of space from the narrow viewport of the starship's stellar dawn, her violet skin reflected the faint light of distant stars, and her silver hair flowed like a delicate thread in zero gravity. But her mind was far from the beauty of the galaxy. She had less than a week left before the curse of her species would claim her. She could already feel the creeping cold, the slow onset of decay that had taken so many before her. For Azara, a Syrixian female, the stakes of survival were as simple as they were cruel. If she didn't conceive before her 30th birthday, her body would wither, and death would follow soon after. Azara gritted her teeth. She had never been one to accept fate quietly. She wasn't like the others. She wouldn't simply let nature take its course. The Syrixian had once been a proud warrior species, but after centuries of peace, they had grown soft. But not her. She had trained, honed her skills in combat, and was prepared for any challenge, except this one. Her enemy was not one she could defeat with her sword or her blaster. It was her own biology. And time was running out. Approaching destination. The ship's eye chimed, snapping Azara out of her thoughts. She stood up and secured her weapons, an energy blade she had inherited from her father, and a standard-issue blaster strapped to her hip. "Let's hope this lead is solid," she muttered to herself. Her final hope lay on a desolate planet on the edge of Cygnus 11, an outlaw haven, where she had been told to find a human named Dr. Caleb Royce. Rumors spoke of his radical methods, his willingness to experiment on the unknown, and his reputation for working miracles. If anyone could prevent her from becoming inactive, it was Royce. But there were whispers that he was dangerous, that his experiments came at a steep price. Yet, what choice did she have? As the stellar dawn entered the atmosphere of the barren world below, Azara's pulse quickened. The planet was mostly wasteland, rocky terrain as far as the eye could see, a harsh environment teeming with monstrous creatures. It wasn't the kind of place any sane person would choose to live, which made it perfect for someone like Royce, always on the run from galactic authorities. The ship landed with a soft thud, and the ramp descended slowly, revealing the windswept landscape. Azara adjusted her cloak, covering her face to shield herself from the dust storm brewing outside. The atmosphere was thick with tension, the sky a sickly orange, and the ground crackled underfoot as she moved. Following the coordinates her contact had given her, Azara trekked across the rocky wasteland toward an abandoned mining facility. This was where Dr. Royce was supposed to be hiding. The air was thick with the scent of sulfur, and the occasional howl of a far-off creature sent chills down her spine. She had fought many beasts in her life, but here, on this planet, everything felt different, more dangerous. When she reached the facility, the large steel doors loomed in front of her, sealed tight. She knocked twice, and after a long pause, a voice crackled through the intercom. "Who's there?" "Azara. I'm here for Royce," she replied, trying to mask the desperation in her voice. There was a brief silence before the door slid open with a mechanical hiss. Azara stepped inside and found herself in a dimly lit corridor, the walls lined with outdated equipment and broken machinery. A tall, thin figure appeared at the end of the hallway. Royce. He looked every bit the rogue scientist she had heard about, with unkempt hair, a scruffy beard, and piercing eyes that seemed to see through her. His lab coat was stained with oil and grime, but his presence commanded attention. "Azara, I presume," he said, his voice calm, almost bored. "You're late. I thought you'd show up sooner." Azara squared her shoulders. "I've been busy trying to stay alive." Royce raised an eyebrow, then gestured for her to follow him deeper into the facility. "Let's not waste time then. You're here because you believe I can fix your little problem. The thing is, most of your kind don't make it this far. I'm not like the others." Azara shot back. "I'll do whatever it takes." Royce smirked. "Good, because what I'm about to attempt is dangerous. It's not a simple procedure, and there are no guarantees. You've heard of my work, so you know what's at stake." As they entered the main lab, Azara's eyes scanned the room, taking in the various devices, tubes filled with strange liquids, and surgical instruments scattered across workbenches. In the center of the room was a containment chamber, unlike anything she had ever seen before. It hummed with energy, casting a pale blue light across the lab. "This is your salvation," Royce said, patting the side of the chamber. "If it works." Azara took a step closer, her heart pounding in her chest. "And if it doesn't, then you'll die," Royce answered bluntly. "But then again, you were going to die anyway, weren't you?" The weight of his words settled over Azara like a dark cloud. She didn't come here to fail. She couldn't. There had to be a way. Her instincts, her training as a warrior, all told her to fight, to resist the fear clawing at her. But this was a different kind of battle, one she couldn't fight alone. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady, despite the fear gnawing at her insides. Royce nodded, pulling up a data pad and tapping a few buttons. "We begin in an hour. Get yourself ready." As Azara left the lab to gather her thoughts, she looked out into the desolate landscape beyond the facility. She had come this far, pushed herself to the edge of the galaxy, to the edge of survival. She wasn't about to give up now. Whatever happened in that lab, she would survive. She had to. Azara paced in the small room where Royce had left her, her mind racing. The cold metallic walls of the facility seemed to close in on her, but her thoughts were louder than the silence. Every second that passed was one less moment in her life. The anxiety gnawed at her, but the faint echo of determination kept her grounded. She couldn't let fear take control. Not now. Suddenly, the door slid open with a sharp hiss. A woman stepped inside, her features human, but her eyes gleamed with a mechanical blue. She wore a technician's uniform and carried a small tray of medical supplies. "I'm Dr. Nyla Hart," she introduced herself, her voice a calm contrast to the sterile environment. "I'll be assisting Dr. Royce with your procedure." Azara scrutinized Nyla for a moment, noticing the subtle enhancements embedded in her skin. "You're human, but augmented." Nyla nodded, setting the tray on a nearby table. "Yes, I'm what you might call an experimental hybrid. Royce doesn't just work on aliens, you know. His methods have varied applications." Azara's gaze flickered between Nyla and the tray. "And you trust him?" Nyla hesitated for a brief moment, then smiled faintly. "Trust? No, but I respect his genius. He saved my life more than once, and if anyone can help you, it's him." That wasn't exactly comforting, but it was enough to keep Azara from backing out. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "I don't have much of a choice, do I?" Azara muttered, her voice low. "No," Nyla agreed softly, "but it's better than the alternative." A chime echoed through the room, and Royce's voice followed over the intercom. "Azara, it's time. Come to the lab." Nyla offered a nod of encouragement before leading Azara back through the dim corridors to the sterile, cold heart of the facility. As they entered the lab, Royce was already preparing the containment chamber. The humming energy field surrounding it pulsed with a strange intensity, casting eerie shadows along the walls. "Let's get this over with," Royce said, glancing up from his datapad. His voice was sharp, devoid of any warmth or concern. To him, this was just another experiment. But to Azara, this was her last chance at survival. She stepped toward the chamber, her heart thundering in her chest. The sleek metal door slid open, revealing a small padded seat inside. It looked harmless, but Azara knew better. "How does this work?" she asked, her voice strained. Royce tapped a few more commands into his datapad. "You sit inside, and the chamber will analyze your biological structure. I'll be using a mix of genetic modification and cellular regeneration to try and halt the aging process that's killing you. But there's a catch." Azara narrowed her eyes. "What catch?" "The process isn't reversible. It'll change you at a fundamental level, down to your DNA. I can't say what the outcome will be. You could live, or you could become something else." "Something else?" Azara frowned, her stomach twisting with unease. Royce sighed, growing impatient. The process is unpredictable. Your body might adapt, or it might reject the modifications entirely. There's no way to know for sure. Azara clenched her fists. This was her last hope. She had come too far to turn back now. Do it. Without another word, she climbed into the chamber and sat down, the metal walls closing in around her. The doors sealed with a mechanical hiss, and the hum of the machine intensified. The chamber's interior glowed, casting an ethereal light that made her skin tingle. Royce's voice echoed in her ears through the comm system. You're going to feel a little discomfort. Just hold still. Azara gritted her teeth as a sharp pain shot through her body. The sensation wasn't just discomfort, it was agony. Her muscles tensed, and her vision blurred as the chamber worked its strange magic. She could feel something deep within her changing, shifting. It was as if her very essence was being rewritten, molecule by molecule. The pain grew worse, searing through her like fire, but she forced herself to remain still. Her mind screamed at her to escape, to tear herself free, but she couldn't move. Not yet. She had to endure. Time seemed to stretch into eternity. Every second felt like an hour, every pulse of the machine dragging her closer to the edge of consciousness. And just when she thought she couldn't take any more, the pain stopped. Silence filled the chamber, and Azara blinked, her vision slowly clearing. Azara, Royce's voice crackled in her ear. It's over. How do you feel? For a moment, she didn't respond. Her body felt different, stronger, somehow, but foreign. She glanced down at her hands, half expecting to see something monstrous, but they looked the same. Yet there was an odd energy thrumming beneath her skin. I feel strange, she admitted, her voice hoarse. Good, Royce replied, his tone unreadable. Come out, and we'll run some tests. The chamber door slid open, and Azara stepped out, her legs trembling slightly. Nyla was waiting, her eyes full of concern. Royce, however, was already focused on the data streaming across his screen. What did you do to me? Azara asked, her voice low. Royce glanced up from his data pad, his expression unreadable. You're still alive, aren't you? Azara's hands clenched into fists. That's not an answer. Before Royce could respond, the facility shook violently, a deep rumble echoing through the walls. Alarms blared, and the lights flickered. Nyla's eyes widened in alarm, and Royce cursed under his breath. What the hell is going on? Azara demanded, her body instinctively moving into a defensive stance. Looks like the locals are getting restless, Royce muttered, rushing toward the main control panel. The planet's wildlife is a bit aggressive. And it seems we've attracted some attention. A deafening roar echoed from outside, followed by the sound of something massive crashing against the facility's exterior. Azara's heart raced as she glanced toward the door. You didn't think to mention the monsters before I came here. She snapped, reaching for her blaster. Royce shrugged, still focused on his console. I assumed you'd figure it out eventually. Another roar shook the facility, this time closer. Azara's instincts flared. Whatever was outside wasn't just angry, it was hunting them. Guess it's time to put your new body to the test, Royce said with a grim smile. Let's see if you're as resilient as I hoped. Azara's pulse quickened, but she wasn't afraid. If the planet's monsters thought she was an easy target, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The facility shook again, dust raining down from the ceiling as the monstrous roar reverberated through the structure. Azara's senses were on high alert, the strange energy coursing through her veins amplifying her awareness. She could feel the subtle vibrations in the floor, the distant echo of claws scraping against metal, and the heavy, predatory breath of whatever beast lurked outside. Royce glanced up from his console, his fingers still dancing across the control panel. Nyla, get the defensive systems online. Nyla moved quickly, her fingers tapping in a sequence on the wall-mounted control pad. Lights flickered to life, and the faint hum of energy shields activating vibrated through the air. But the shields, as Azara had learned from her previous encounters with hostile creatures, would only slow the beasts down. They wouldn't stop them. Azara gripped her blaster, her eyes narrowing. What kind of monsters are we dealing with? Royce didn't look up. The wildlife here is adaptive, extremely so. They evolve rapidly, feeding off the planet's unique energy. I'd say they're the perfect test subjects for your new abilities. Azara bit back a retort, her attention focused on the growing noise outside. The facility's walls were thick, but even they couldn't withstand an assault from multiple creatures. She could hear the scratching now, the metal groaning under the weight of something massive. A quick glance toward the security monitor showed several hulking silhouettes moving just outside the perimeter, their forms barely visible in the darkness. "I didn't sign up for a deathmatch with your science projects," she muttered. "You didn't sign up at all," Royce countered, finally looking up from his work. "But if you want to live, you're going to have to fight." Azara's jaw tightened, her grip on the blaster firm. Her body still felt foreign, the changes from the procedure pulsing beneath her skin, but there was no time to dwell on it. Survival demanded action. The walls groaned as one of the creatures slammed against the exterior, its snarls vibrating through the facility. Azara's heart pounded in time with the thudding impacts. "Can your new defenses hold them off?" Nyla asked, her voice tight with concern. "For a while," Royce replied, his tone matter-of-fact. "But not long. We need to evacuate the facility." Azara's eyes flicked to the exit. "And go where?" "There's a ship not far from here," Royce said, gesturing toward a map that flickered to life on the main screen. "If we can reach it, we'll be able to escape the planet." The ground shook again, this time more violently, as one of the creatures broke through the outer layer of the facility. A section of the wall buckled, the reinforced metal giving way to reveal a massive, scaly limb. Razor-sharp claws gouged into the structure, tearing it apart with terrifying ease. "There's no time," Nyla shouted, backing away from the creature's reach. Azara's instincts took over. Without thinking, she darted toward the breach, her blaster raised. Her heart raced, and her body moved faster than she expected, faster than was humanly possible. She fired a rapid series of shots at the creature's exposed limb. The blaster bolts struck true, searing into the thick scales, but the beast barely flinched. It let out an ear-splitting roar, and the wall caved in completely. The creature stepped through the breach, revealing its full, terrifying form, a towering beast with armored skin, glowing eyes, and rows of teeth designed for ripping flesh. It was a nightmare come to life, and it was fixated on them. Azara didn't hesitate. With a sudden burst of speed, she launched herself at the creature, her body moving with a fluidity and strength she hadn't expected. Her blaster was useless now, so she holstered it mid-leap, and instead went for the creature's throat, her enhanced reflexes guiding her every movement. To her surprise, her hands found purchase on the thick, scaly hide, and with a surge of newfound strength, she slammed the creature's head to the side, causing it to stumble. The beast roared in fury, but Azara didn't relent. She moved with an almost inhuman grace, dodging the creature's snapping jaws and lethal claws as if her body already knew how to fight. "Holy!" Nyla gasped, watching in disbelief. "How is she doing that?" Royce watched with cold, calculating eyes, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "The procedure worked. She's adapting." Azara barely registered their voices. All she could feel was the raw power coursing through her body moving faster, stronger, more precise than ever before. She was no longer just fighting for survival. She was overpowering the creature, her every strike landing with devastating force. The beast tried to lash out, but Azara was already anticipating its movements. With a powerful jump, she leaped onto its back, grabbing hold of its armored neck. With a guttural cry, she twisted, using all of her strength to wrench the creature's head to the side. There was a sickening crack, and the beast collapsed to the ground with a final pitiful groan. Azara jumped down, breathing hard. Her body tingled with the aftershocks of adrenaline and the strange energy that now pulsed through her veins. She had done it. She had taken down the monster, and she had barely broken a sweat. Nyla and Royce stared at her, stunned. Royce's expression shifted into something resembling pride. "I knew it," he murmured. "You're more than I could have hoped for." Azara shot him a glare. "Don't start congratulating yourself just yet." Before Royce could respond, the sound of more creatures closing in filled the air. The thudding footsteps of the other monsters reverberated through the walls, and Azara knew they didn't have much time. Royce's calm voice cut through the tension. "We need to move. Now." Azara nodded, adrenaline still pumping through her. "Lead the way." Together, they bolted through the corridors of the facility, the sounds of the monstrous creatures growing louder behind them. The beasts had broken through, and it wouldn't be long before they reached the heart of the structure. But Azara didn't feel fear anymore, only a strange, confident calm. Whatever Royce had done to her, it had saved her life, and now she was ready to face whatever came next. Azara sprinted through the dimly lit corridors, her footsteps silent and swift. Royce and Mila struggled to keep pace, their breaths labored as they raced toward the facility's exit. The beasts behind them roared and shrieked, tearing through walls and machinery, the sound of their pursuit an ever-present threat. Royce glanced back, sweat running down his face. "They're getting closer." Azara didn't respond. Her senses were heightened, her mind sharp, and her body seemed to know exactly how to move, how to conserve energy, how to run without tiring. It was as if the alien power coursing through her had fully integrated, turning her into something far beyond human. They'd reached the main door, a massive reinforced barrier that had kept the creatures at bay for as long as possible. Royce hurried to the control panel, frantically typing in commands. Come on," he muttered, his fingers flying over the keys. Azara stood at his side, her blaster in hand, ready to fight off whatever broke through first. The pounding footsteps of the monsters were growing louder, echoing through the metal walls of the facility. She could feel their presence in the air, their hunger and aggression almost palpable. "Royce, hurry," Nyla urged, her voice tight with panic. "I'm working on it." Royce snapped, his hands moving faster. "The door system's been damaged. It's taking longer to override." Azara gritted her teeth, scanning the hallway for any sign of movement. Her body was tense, every muscle coiled like a spring. She was ready to unleash her newfound strength again, to face whatever came through the shattered walls. But they needed to get out. There were too many of the creatures for even her enhanced abilities to handle alone. Finally, the door groaned as it began to open. A sliver of moonlight spilled through the gap, and fresh air rushed into the facility. Royce didn't wait for the door to fully open. He squeezed through the small opening and motioned for the others to follow. "Go. Now." Nyla darted through next, followed closely by Azara. The moment they were outside, Royce slammed his hand on a nearby control pad, and the door began to close again. Behind it, the sounds of the creatures grew deafening, their roars echoing through the facility as they neared the entrance. Azara watched the door seal shut just as the first of the beasts slammed against it with a bone-rattling thud. The metal shuddered under the impact, but for now, it held. "That won't hold them for long," Nyla said, her eyes wide with fear. "It doesn't need to," Royce replied, catching his breath. "We just need enough time to reach the ship." Azara scanned the landscape, her enhanced vision picking up every detail in the dim light. The planet was harsh, its rocky terrain jagged and uneven, illuminated only by the pale glow of its twin moons. In the distance, she could see the outline of the ship, Royce's promised escape. But it was far, and the creatures wouldn't stay trapped inside the facility for long. "Let's move," Azara said, her voice steady despite the tension. "We need to get to that ship before they break through." Royce nodded, and the three of them began their trek across the rocky expanse. The terrain was treacherous, the ground uneven and scattered with jagged stones and deep crevices. Azara moved with ease, her body adapting to the challenges of the environment. But Royce and Nila struggled, their movements slower and more cautious. Azara felt a growing sense of urgency. She could hear the faint sounds of the beasts in the distance, their roars echoing through the night. They would be on them soon. "Stay close," Azara called back to the others, her pace quickening. "We don't have much time." They pushed forward, the ship growing larger with each step. But as they neared it, a new sound reached Azara's ears, a deep, rhythmic thrum that sent a shiver down her spine. Royce noticed it too. He slowed to a stop, his eyes narrowing as he listened. "What is that?" Azara focused, her heightened senses picking up the vibrations in the air. It was coming from the ship, an unnatural mechanical hum that wasn't part of the planet's usual atmosphere. Nyla's face went pale. "That's not right. The ship shouldn't be making that sound." Azara's eyes scanned the area around the ship, and she saw it. Movement, small, subtle, but unmistakable. Figures, humanoid in shape, moving near the ship's hull. They were setting something up. "We're not alone," Azara said, her voice low. "There are others here." Royce's expression darkened. "We need to find out who they are. They could be hostile." Azara nodded. "Stay back. I'll check it out." Before either of them could protest, Azara slipped into the shadows, moving with a speed and grace that felt completely natural now. She approached the ship, her enhanced vision allowing her to see the figures more clearly. There were 3 of them, dressed in dark, tactical gear, working on something attached to the ship's hull. Azara crept closer, her heart pounding. Whoever they were armed, and they clearly had no intention of letting Royce and the others escape. She watched as one of the figures adjusted something on the device they were attaching to the ship, a small blinking object that looked suspiciously like an explosive. "Sabotage," Azara muttered under her breath. Her mind raced. She had to act fast. The creatures would be breaking free of the facility any moment now, and if they didn't have a working ship, they were as good as dead. But if she attacked the saboteurs head-on, she might alert them before she had a chance to stop them. Azara weighed her options. She needed to disable the explosives and take out the saboteurs, fast and quietly. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. The power flowing through her felt more controlled now, more focused. She could do this. Without a sound, she darted forward, her body a blur as she closed the distance between herself and the nearest figure. In a single fluid motion, she grabbed him from behind, her enhanced strength allowing her to snap his neck before he could even make a sound. The other 2 saboteurs didn't notice their comrades fall. Azara moved swiftly, taking out the second one with a precise strike to the throat. The third had just enough time to notice something was wrong before Azara was on him, her fist connecting with his jaw and sending him crumpling to the ground. It was over in seconds. Azara knelt beside the explosive device, examining it closely. It was sophisticated, but her enhanced mind quickly figured out how to disarm it. With a few quick adjustments, the blinking light faded, and the threat was neutralized. She stood up, breathing hard. The ship was theirs. But as she looked back toward the facility, she saw the creatures bursting through the doors, their monstrous forms silhouetted against the night sky. Time was running out. Azara sprinted back to Royce and Nyla, the beasts now breaking free from the facility. Their horrifying forms, towering and grotesque, tore through the reinforced doors with terrifying ease. The night echoed with their roars, each one a promise of death and destruction. "They're coming," Royce shouted, his face pale with fear. "Did you disable the bombs?" "Done," Azara replied, her voice steady. "Get to the ship now." Royce didn't hesitate. He grabbed Nyla's arm, pulling her toward the ramp leading into the vessel. Azara followed closely behind, her eyes never leaving the advancing horde of monsters. The ramp creaked as they rushed inside. Royce immediately ran to the cockpit, powering up the ship's systems. Nyla collapsed into a seat, her breath ragged as she tried to process everything that had happened. Azara remained near the entrance, her blaster still in hand, watching as the creatures closed in. Royce's voice crackled over the intercom. "Engines are hot. We're getting out of here, but it's going to be tight." Azara nodded, though he couldn't see her. She could feel the ship humming to life beneath her feet. But the monsters were almost upon them, their massive bodies charging across the rocky landscape, hungry and furious. One of the creatures leaped toward the ship, its long claws reaching for the ramp. Azara fired her blaster, the shot hitting the beast square in the chest. It let out a deafening screech, but didn't slow down. Azara fired again, this time aiming for its head. The creature stumbled, its body crashing to the ground just as the ship began to lift off. But more were coming. The ship rose higher, the ramp still open. Azara fired shot after shot, trying to keep the monsters at bay. One of the beasts managed to leap high enough to latch onto the ramp, its claws digging into the metal. Azara didn't hesitate. She sprinted forward, her enhanced strength allowing her to leap onto the creature. She slammed her fist into its head, the impact sending a shockwave through its body. The creature howled in pain, losing its grip and plummeting back to the ground. As the ramp finally closed, sealing them inside, Azara collapsed against the wall, her chest heaving. The ship's engines roared as they ascended into the sky, leaving the nightmare below. Royce's voice came through the intercom again, this time calmer. "We're in orbit. We're safe. For now." Azara stood up, her legs shaky but steady enough to carry her to the cockpit. She found Royce hunched over the controls, sweat dripping down his face. He looked exhausted, but alive. Nyla was seated nearby, her hands trembling as she stared out the viewport at the stars. She looked up as Azara entered, her eyes filled with a mix of relief and fear. "What were those things?" Nyla asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Azara replied, her gaze distant. "But they weren't natural. Something, or someone made them." Royce turned in his seat, frowning. "You think this was all deliberate? Someone sent those creatures after us?" Azara nodded. "Those saboteurs back at the ship, they were trying to make sure we didn't escape. They planted explosives, and they were armed. This wasn't an accident." Royce's expression darkened. But why? Who would do this? Azara didn't have an answer. She could only feel the cold certainty that this was far from over. Whoever was behind this had wanted them dead, and they had the resources to create the monstrous beings that had hunted them. "We need to leave this sector," Azara said firmly. "Find somewhere safe to regroup." Royce nodded, his hands moving over the controls as he plotted a course out of the system. "Agreed. We'll jump to the nearest neutral zone." The ship hummed as the warp drive activated, the stars stretching into long streaks of light as they hurtled through space. For a brief moment, silence fell over the cabin, a welcome respite after the chaos. Azara leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes. She could feel the alien energy inside her, pulsing through her veins, more controlled now. It had saved her life, given her the strength to fight back. But it also raised more questions than answers. "Azara," Nyla's voice broke the silence, soft but filled with uncertainty. "What happened to you back there? You're different now." Azara opened her eyes, meeting Nyla's gaze. "I don't know. Something inside me changed when I was left on that planet. I can feel it. It's like I've been enhanced." Royce turned in his seat, frowning. "You mean like those creatures?" Azara shook her head. "No, I'm still me. But whatever was done to me, it made me stronger, faster. I don't understand it yet, but I'm going to find out." Nyla looked uneasy, but she nodded. "We'll figure this out together." Azara gave her a small smile. She appreciated the sentiment, but she knew this journey was far from over. There were too many unknowns, too many dangers still lurking in the shadows. And then, as if the universe itself was listening, The ship's alarm blared. Incoming transmission, Royce muttered, tapping the console. It's encrypted. Azara stood up, her body tense. Play it. The screen flickered to life, revealing a shadowy figure cloaked in darkness. Their face was hidden, but their voice was cold and calculating. You've survived longer than I anticipated, the figure said. Impressive, but you won't escape next time. Azara's heart pounded in her chest. She stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. Who are you? What do you want? The figure chuckled, a low, menacing sound. I am the one who created those creatures. I am the one who controls your fate, Azara. And soon, you will be mine. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving only silence in its wake. Royce stared at the screen, his knuckles white, as he gripped the controls. Who the hell was that? Azara didn't answer. She felt a cold certainty settle in her chest. Whoever that was, they were the reason she had been left on that planet. They were the reason the creatures had hunted them. And they weren't done with her yet. We need to stay ahead of them, Azara said quietly, her resolve hardening. Whatever they have planned, we can't let them win. Royce nodded, setting a new course. Agreed. We'll find out who's behind this, and we'll stop them. Azara took one last look at the stars outside the viewport. Her journey was far from over, but she was no longer alone. Together, they would face whatever came next. And this time, she was ready for the fight. Days passed in relative calm as Royce, Nyla, and Azara floated through the outer reaches of neutral space. They found temporary refuge in a secluded asteroid belt, hidden from the prying eyes of those who sought their lives. The ship's repairs were underway, and though tensions were high, they felt a semblance of safety for the first time since their escape. Azara spent much of her time alone, her mind preoccupied with the transformation she had undergone. The alien power within her felt both like a gift and a curse. She could sense it in every fiber of her being, humming beneath her skin, waiting to be unleashed. But it also raised more questions, questions that gnawed at her every waking moment. In the ship's small medical bay, Nyla sat across from Azara, running a diagnostic scan. The room was dimly lit, the only sound being the soft whirring of the equipment. Your vitals are remarkable, Nyla said, her voice tinged with awe. It's like your entire body has been enhanced. Your cells are regenerating at an accelerated rate. You're stronger, faster, and you heal almost instantly. Azara nodded, unsurprised. I felt it the moment I woke up on that planet, but I still don't know how or why. Nyla frowned, tapping the screen in front of her. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. Whatever they did to you, it's not just a simple modification. It's something far more advanced. Azara leaned back, her gaze distant. Do you think they can track me through it? Is that how they found us? Nyla hesitated. It's possible. If the same people who created those creatures did this to you, they might have a way to trace the changes in your DNA. But there's no way to know for sure. Azara clenched her fists. Then we need to stay ahead of them. I won't let them control me. Nyla reached out, placing a comforting hand on Azara's arm. We'll figure this out, Azara. You're not alone in this. Azara appreciated the sentiment, but she couldn't shake the feeling that her time was running out. Whoever was hunting them was relentless, and they would stop at nothing to reclaim her. In the cockpit, Royce was deep in conversation with a contact on a secure channel. The screen displayed a grizzled old man, his face scarred from years of battle. He was one of Royce's old allies, someone who had fought in countless skirmishes across the galaxy. Royce, you're playing with fire, the man mourned, his voice gravelly. Whoever's after you, they've got resources and power far beyond anything we've seen before. You need to lay low, disappear. Royce shook his head, determination etched in his features. I can't do that, Garrick. They won't stop until they have Azara, and I'm not going to let that happen. Garrick sighed. Then you need to find out who they are and what they want. And fast. Because if they catch you off guard, you're done. Royce nodded. We're working on it, but I need information. Anything you can dig up about these people, their operations, their motives. We can't afford to be blindsided again. Garrick leaned back, scratching his chin. I'll see what I can do. But Royce, be careful. These aren't just your average mercenaries. They've got something darker backing them. Royce frowned. What do you mean? Garrick's expression darkened. There are rumors, whispers of an organization that's been working in the shadows for decades. They deal in illegal experiments, genetic modifications, and worse, if they're involved. You're in deeper than you think. Royce felt a chill run down his spine. I'll keep that in mind. Thanks, Garrick. The screen went dark, leaving Royce alone with his thoughts. The more he learned, the more dangerous their situation seemed. But he had no intention of backing down. They would find out who was behind this and stop them before it was too late. Azara stood on the observation deck, staring out at the vast expanse of stars. The calm of space was deceptive, a quiet before the storm she knew was coming. Her mind drifted back to the figure on the screen, the one who had threatened her, claimed control over her fate. She wouldn't let them win. She wouldn't be their puppet, their experiment. As she stood there, lost in thought, Nyla joined her, standing silently by her side. After a moment, she spoke. Do you ever wonder why this happened to you? Nyla asked softly. Why you were chosen? Azara nodded. Every day. But I can't let it consume me. I have to focus on what's ahead. Nyla smiled faintly. You're stronger than you think. Azara, whatever happens, we'll face it together. Azara turned to her, her expression determined. And we'll win, no matter what it takes. Nyla nodded, her eyes filled with resolve. No matter what. The calm of space continued around them, but both women knew it was temporary. The real battle was yet to come. The days of calm were shattered when the ship's alarm blared, the sound echoing through the corridors like a death knell. Azara, Royce, and Nyla rushed to the cockpit, their hearts pounding with dread. Royce's hands flew over the controls as he brought up the radar. His face paled as he saw the screen. They found us, Royce said, his voice tight. Multiple ships inbound, heavily armed. Azara felt a surge of adrenaline. How much time do we have? Minutes, Royce replied, his voice grim. They must have traced us somehow. We need to get out of here now. Nyla checked the ship's systems, her expression growing more concerned by the second. We can't outrun them, Royce. They've got faster ships, and they're closing in too quickly. Royce clenched his jaw. Then we'll have to fight. Azara didn't hesitate. What do we have for weapons? Not much, Royce admitted. But we've got enough firepower to make it a fight they'll remember. Nyla's fingers danced over the controls as she prepared the ship's defenses. I'll do what I can to keep their targeting systems off us, but we'll be outnumbered and outgunned. Azara felt the alien power within her stir, ready to be unleashed. We've faced worse odds. Let's give them hell. The ship shuddered as the first volley of enemy fire hit their shields. Royce's hands moved with precision, returning fire with the ship's limited arsenal. Explosions lit up the dark expanse of space as the battle began in earnest. Azara could see the enemy ships forming like a pack of wolves, their sleek designs and advanced weaponry a testament to the resources behind them. But she wouldn't let fear take hold. She focused on the task at hand, her mind clear and sharp. Royce, keep us moving, Azara commanded. We can't let them pin us down. Royce nodded, maneuvering the ship through the chaos, dodging enemy fire with deft skill. Nyla worked frantically, rerouting power to the shields and targeting systems, trying to give them any advantage she could. The ship rocked as another blast hit them, this time harder. Alarms blared, warning of damage to their hull. Azara gritted her teeth, refusing to back down. We need to take out their lid ship, Azara said, her voice cutting through the noise. If we can disable it, The others might retreat. Royce glanced at the radar, spotting the largest of the enemy vessels. It's risky, but it might be our only shot. Nyla recalibrated the targeting system, locking onto the lid ship. I'll need a clear shot. Royce, get us in position. Royce pushed the engines to their limit, weaving through the enemy fleet with precision. Azara could feel the strain on the ship, the groaning of the metal as it fought to hold together. Finally, they were in range. Nyla fired a volley of torpedoes, aiming straight for the lead ship's engine core. The seconds stretched out, each one filled with tension. The torpedoes hit their mark, and the enemy ship erupted in a massive explosion. The shockwave rippled through space, sending debris and smaller ships spinning out of control. For a moment, it seemed as though they had won. But then, out of the debris, another wave of ships emerged, larger and more formidable than the first. They just keep coming, Nyla cried, her voice filled with desperation. Royce cursed under his breath. We're not going to survive another round of this. Azara's mind raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and their ship was barely holding together. But she refused to accept defeat. There had to be another way. And then it hit her. I have an idea, Azara said, her voice filled with a resolve that surprised even her. But it's risky. Royce looked at her, desperation and hope warring in his eyes. What do you need? Get us close to their command ship, Azara said, her mind working through the plan. I'm going to board it. Nyla's eyes widened. You'll be outnumbered. There's no way you can take them all on alone. Azara met her gaze, her expression steely. I won't be alone. Whatever they did to me, it's given me the power to fight back. I have to try. Royce hesitated, but then he nodded. All right, we'll get you as close as we can. But be careful, Azara. If we lose you, you won't, Azara said firmly. We're going to end this, together. Royce maneuvered the ship toward the command vessel, dodging enemy fire as they closed the distance. Azara prepared herself, the alien energy within her pulsing with anticipation. As they neared the ship, Royce brought the transport beam online. This is as close as I can get you. Good luck. Azara nodded, stepping onto the platform. See you on the other side. With a flash of light, she was transported aboard the enemy ship. The moment she materialized, alarms blared, and armed soldiers rushed toward her. But Azara was ready. The power within her surged, and she moved with inhuman speed, taking out the soldiers with precision and ease. Her movements were fluid, almost instinctual, as if the alien energy was guiding her every step. She fought her way through the ship, her path clear in her mind. She could sense the presence of the one who had spoken to her, the one who claimed control over her fate. Finally, she reached the command center. The doors slid open, revealing a dark, cold room dominated by a single figure, the shadowy figure from the transmission. The figure turned to face her, their features obscured by a hood. You've done well to get this far, Azara. But this is where it ends. Azara felt the power within her rise, filling her with a sense of purpose. No, this is where I take back control. The figure laughed, a low, chilling sound. You still don't understand, do you? You were created for this, to be the perfect weapon. And now you will fulfill your purpose. Azara's eyes narrowed. I'm no one's weapon. I make my own choices. With a cry, she unleashed the full extent of her power, a wave of energy that shook the entire ship. The figure staggered back, surprised by the force of her attack. You've grown stronger, the figure hissed. But you're still no match for me. Azara didn't falter. She pressed the attack, her movements a blur as she closed the distance. The figure fought back, wielding their own power, but Azara was relentless. The battle raged, the room crackling with energy as they clashed. But Azara refused to back down. This was her fight, her destiny, and she would win. With a final powerful strike, Azara sent the figure crashing to the ground. She stood over them, her chest heaving with exertion. The figure looked up at her, their hood falling back to reveal a familiar face, one that sent a shock of recognition through Azara. "You?" Azara whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. The figure smirked, blood trickling from their mouth. "Yes, Azara. It's me, your creator, your father." Azara staggered back, the revelation hitting her like a physical blow. "No, that's not possible." "It is the figure," her father said weakly. "You were my greatest creation, but you've surpassed even my expectations."